Hello, welcome back to the Young Fan Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about everything Charlton Athletic. What is going wrong at the Valley? Are they in a serious relegation battle at this point in the season? What are the short-term fixes that Charlton could put into place? And how can they successfully restructure and rebuild the football club? All of which we're going to delve deep into today. So I think it might be interesting maybe coming from a neutral. I'm not a Charlton fan. I haven't followed Charlton for 25 years. And maybe looking at it through non-Charlton tinted glasses could be a little bit interesting. So I'm not an expert. I'm not going to pretend like an expert. Charlton fans and Charlton, you know much more than I ever will. So let me know in the comments down below, Charlton, and other fans as well. I think this could be looked at from a lot of League One fans, but specifically Charlton. Let me know in the comments down below what you think the issue is. Let me know what you think of this episode, really. Have I hit any nails on the head? If I have, let me know. But most importantly, if I haven't, give me some suggestions in the comments down below. I'm always looking at them, always reading them, and I'm also, of course, responding to them as well. I'd be intrigued to see what the situation is. And I'm going to hit you the facts first and foremost. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but what I can do is provide you with the straight facts and the current issues that we can see at face value. Ultimately, they're 16th in League One after 34 games. They've got a -6 goal difference, and they've conceded 47 goals so far this season. Now, 47 goals conceded isn't awful, really, when you compare it to the rest and the other 23 teams in the league. But, you know, 16th in the league for a club like Charlton, the stature with the significance of the football club when it comes to the size of the fan base and the history of the club, it should not be 16th in League One, and that's a very, very clear thing to see. The issue does come in the last and the recent form. They've had a 5th consecutive defeat on Saturday. They lost to Sheffield Wednesday 2-0, and they failed to score a goal in their last 3 games. A total of 12 goals conceded in those 5 games that they lost consecutively in a row. They registered 1 shot on target at Hillsborough across that 90-minute game of football. And that's just the situation currently, how we look at it. It's not great. It really isn't great. And we look at that recent form, it's difficult to look past that recent form. It simply is not good enough. And like I said, when you talk about a football club like Charlton, where it has been in terms of the league it's been in, the history that football club has got, it should not be where it is. And that's just the way it is, again, from face value. In terms of the start of the season and the expectations, sometimes that's always quite interesting to look at. I did an episode like this similar to Sunderland. Obviously, they sacked their manager, Lee Johnson. I sort of broke down the situation at Sunderland. I said that the biggest thing, it does come down to expectation. It comes down to expectation management. And it comes from the football club providing an expectation at the start of the season. What are the fan reaction of that expectation? And is it a possibility? And where are they at this point? Are they anywhere near that expectation that was set at the start of the season? And ultimately, from what I've heard, and I've sort of listened to a few Charlton podcasts, I've watched a few things from Charlton fans and the YouTube channels they've got, apparently, from what they've been saying, is that, you know, Charlton themselves, in terms of the football club, were providing this sort of expectation that they were going to blow this season off. I think the word was they were going to blow the season apart or something along those lines. They really were piling on an expectation of success at Charlton, and that can be so dangerous. So dangerous. I understand why they do it, because of course you're trying to hype up the fans, you're trying to excite the fans going into a season, but it can be so dangerous, and the consequences and the backfire can be so dangerous on those fans, because as soon as you start providing that expectation, especially from the football club, in terms of, I believe it was an owner or a director at that club, they were really piling on that sort of hope and expectation for come the start of the season. You end up where they are now. They've sacked their manager, Nigel Adkins, back in October, I believe. Johnnie Jackson has come in now, of course, ex-captain, ex-player, ex-assistant manager. Now, of course, came as an interim manager, and now is the permanent manager. So there's been a real excitement, I guess, there in terms of someone that knows the football club. And of course, we'll come on to Johnnie Jackson in much more detail, in a few moments' time. But looking at it from that, it's so dangerous. And Charlton did spend money come the start of the season. I think that's maybe where the expectation came from. I did hear one Charlton fan say that they aim to maybe have a lot of the summer transfer windows done before pre-season and have that squad set. And apparently, pretty much from the start of that summer transfer window, a lack of organisation sort of creeped in, and they ended up bringing in players at maybe worrying points, should I say, as the season had already started, or definitely later on than they would have wanted to. So it sounds like there was a plan in place quite early on, but it very quickly sort of got, I guess, broken up in that way. And I think, again, it's so dangerous. I come back to that point of having something inside the football club, and again, that builds on the fans. The fans start believing, and then when it doesn't go well, you end up in a situation like this, and there really is a level of concern, I guess, waving across the football club. I want to come on to October, where they did sack Nigel Adkins as well. It seems as though that appointment wasn't great. Obviously, they brought in him at the end of the previous season, end of last season. He did fairly well. He didn't have a bad season, really. I think he lost one game in the games that he did come in. It was only about 10 games, I think he was in charge of come the end of the season. Of course, they were going to give him the summer. They were going to give him the time to add his own and put his own stamp on the football club, bring in his own players, and he could lead that recruitment process along, of course, with his recruitment team and his coaching team that was part of that process with Nigel Adkins. They did bring players in. They did add players. And like I said, they did spend money. They did bring in some new players. How many of those players have been a success? I'll leave that up to Charlton fans. Some have been, some really haven't been. And I think that, again, is the issue. You're not going to have a window where every transfer works right. But again, you look at the percentage of ones that do and don't really work out. And again, that can be a really, really interesting way of looking at it. Either way, he lost his job in October. Johnnie Jackson came in as an interim. Of course, he was assistant, I believe, under Lee Bauer, who was before Nigel Adkins. Then he was assistant under Nigel Adkins. I believe it was Carl Robinson, the current Oxford United manager, who gave him sort of his first coaching role. He was the captain at the football club. Then obviously, as his playing days died out slightly, he then moved on to the coaching team. Since then, he's been part of the coaching staff at Charlton under the last few managers. So he's been given that coaching experience over the last few, assistant manager roles that he's had. He then came into interim manager. They enjoyed a really, really good spell there. You do feel though that honeymoon period now is coming to an end. Either way, though, a fantastic interim period, a fantastic set of results that he got during that time, and then he gone and got that permanent role. At the moment, though, there's a real level of concern in terms of the connectivity between fans and the football club. And again, that's really, really dangerous. It's so, so dangerous. The fans of the football club is the most important thing. The fans is what makes a football club, really. If you don't have fans, there's no real point in having a football club at all. So when you lose that connectivity, you lose that, that inner community in a footballing sense between the fans, between the football club, between the players, between the staff, between everybody. When you lose that, it can go so, so horribly wrong. And you get yourself and you find yourself in a situation that can be really, really quite damaging. I think Charlton are getting to that point now, if they haven't already, where there really, really is a fan distance between themselves and the football club, between the players, between the staff. And although they've got a manager that, of course, was captain of their football club for quite a long time, the results don't lie. The performances don't lie. And I think the most important is look at the performances. They've lost 5 games in a row, but the performances have been really, really bad. I'm an Oxford United fan, and I was, of course, watching the game in which we beat them at the Valley 4-0 quite recently. And I won't lie, and I won't beat around the bush. Charlton didn't look great at all. And what I found really quickly was as soon as it went down to 1 or even 2-0, it was almost sort of like a giving up attitude from the players. It looked like they just didn't really care too much about the fact they were 2-0 down. They could have come back. Again, 2-0 is certainly not game over in football. 3-0 isn't. I mean, look at Portsmouth at the weekend, 3-0 down at half-time. They get it back to 3-3. It really is a possibility. And again, this season has proved that anybody can beat anybody. Anything can happen in this league. But at 2-0, the attitude of the players were really, really concerned. The frustration kicked in. Sean Clare got sent off. And that was purely down to frustration because we were absolutely outplaying them. Not because, and again, like I said, Oxford were playing well. But Charlton didn't really look like they were really wanting to win, get anything really from the game. There was a really quite poor attitude there. And I feel sorry for the fans because the fans should not have a football club that is like that. That's a really, really worrying time. And again, that proves there needs to be a change. Now, I read a few things from an article, the London News online article, and the journalist that wrote this, looked at a few of the takeaways from the defeat after Sheffield Wednesday game. He looked at some specific moments in the game, but also just generally the football club and what is going on and what needs to be done, basically. And there were sort of 3 big bullet points that I highlighted. So the first one at the moment was it just felt inevitable that Charlton were going to concede and Charlton were going to lose at the weekend against Sheffield Wednesday. Of course, both of them did happen. And that's a really, really worrying place to be as a football club. And I think that says quite a lot about Charlton at the moment. I spoke about Oxford United and the situation there where they did sort of have a giving up attitude. They weren't showing desire. They weren't really showing resilience at all. And they're the key basics of football you need to show. And at moments in the game where it probably wasn't game over, they just let frustration creep in. They let sort of a poor attitude really across the field. And again, that's really quite worrying. I think the entire morale across that football club is low. And again, that's a real, real concern. How are you going to pick yourself up from that? I don't know. It's so difficult. Morale comes, and confidence is everything. Confidence can lift morale. Confidence is one of the biggest things that can lift morale. And confidence, again, comes from results, comes from performances. And if you're not getting either of those, the confidence isn't going to improve. Therefore, the morale isn't going to improve. And then you get a really, really worrying cycle across the football club. And that's what Charlton, I think, are trapped in at the moment. They shouldn't be where they are. And I think I come back to that point. I come back to the situation at the moment where I think there's a sense of shock. A sense of shock of the situation they find themselves in, and a football club like Charlton should not have that air of inevitably losing. That shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case at all. But the facts are there, and you can't you can't really say they shouldn't be, because ultimately they are. And after 34 games, that's exactly where they are. So you've got to look at the season at the moment, and probably do class the season as either a failure or, in a positive sense, I do like to look at the positive side, a massive learning curve, a huge, huge learning curve. And you've got to learn from these. You've got to learn from these mistakes. You've got to learn from the mistakes that were made across the football club. And then you've got to make sure you do not do them again. You don't revisit those mistakes. And the start of next season has to be much, much better. And the whole season has to be much better as well. Make sure you're learning from this season. Like I said, you could class it as a failure, but I think that might be slightly harsh. A massive learning curve is what this has to go down to. And again, you've got to learn. And that's the most important thing. You have to learn from a learning curve. It sounds stupid, but you can have multiple learning curves. But you've got to make sure you don't revisit those mistakes, and you do genuinely learn. I think in moments like these as well, ultimately, are they in a relegation battle? I mean, they are, really. I don't think, personally, I'm not going to come to... I won't say my prediction whether they get relegated. What I will say is I wouldn't panic. There are worse teams in this league than Charlton, and it's crazy for me to say that Charlton Athletic are in a relegation battle, and there's a possibility that they could be going down. And I'm even being asked the question, do I think Charlton will get relegated? I really, really don't think they will. But what I would say is that they are ultimately in a dogfight, and in a dogfight you've got to show lots and lots of different footballing skills. And it comes down to a lot of things. It needs to show grit, it needs to show determination, and it needs to show work rate. Letting a team beat you comfortably like it did against Sheffield Wednesday is not acceptable when you're in this position. It's not acceptable at all. I wouldn't say it's acceptable at any point in a season from any football club. But at this point in the season, where you are only, I think it's 8 points off the relegation zone, when you are at that point, like I said, 8 points, you could go down. I don't think you will, but you could go down. You have to show it the minimum requirement. Determination, grit, work rate. And I'd say if I could sneak another one in there, willing just to run for the shirt. Run for Charlton. Run for the badge. Run for the football club that you're getting paid to play for, basically. You can't be beaten comfortably. I think a fan of Sheffield Wednesday commented on my podcast I did, sort of rounding up the weekend's action, and he said that there's something really, really bad going on at Charlton at the moment. They look like the worst team that he'd seen at Hillsborough this season. I mean, that's worrying. That really is quite worrying. It was that easy for Sheffield Wednesday against Charlton. They didn't even just get out of second gear, Sheffield Wednesday. And again, a team like Charlton with that club of stature, of history, and the fan base they've got there, the brilliant fan base they've got there, that has to be that minimum requirement. And if you're not showing it, then it's probably time for you to go if you're a player. Another one was same problems, recurring problems. And again, we talk about this being a massive learning curve. I mean, short term, apparently there isn't much learning going on. It has to happen long term. I mean, we look at same problems here. Recurring mistakes. It's a concern for the manager in particular. Johnnie Jackson now will be looking at this and going, the same mistakes. What are we going to have to do to not keep seeing these mistakes happen? And by the way, these are things just genuinely on the pitch. Exploited by simple passes down the side of the defence. Set pieces, they considered to another one on Saturday. Again, that could be a mixture of tactical things, could be a mixture of personnel things. It probably is a mixture of all of those things. But either way, that comes down to the coaching staff, that comes down to the manager, and also the players. Well, they have to take responsibility. It's not just the tactical side of things. It's not just the coaching staff. It's the players as well. The players are in this position. The players have played the 34 games this season. Not all of them, but a lot of them have played close to 30 games this season that are still playing now. and they are 16th in the league. They're 8 points from relegation zone. They have to take that responsibility. They're the ones running for 90 minutes. They're the ones that have to take that responsibility. It's as simple as that. Ultimately, Johnnie Jackson will have to take a lot, and ultimately, if it goes that badly wrong, he'll be the one that loses his job. The players won't necessarily lose their jobs. They'll always be footballers until they retire, obviously, but they'll always be footballers, if you know what I mean. Johnnie Jackson will lose his job as Charlton manager if things don't turn themselves around. So the players and the manager and the staff there have to take responsibility. But the players have to take big responsibility as well, especially with these recurring mistakes on the pitch. Of course, the manager will be concerned by that, and he'll be looking at trying to change that and trying to make different adjustments to sort those things out. But the players have to take that sort of responsibility. Another negative, but is almost a positive. I sort of try to switch a big negative on its head and turn it into a positive. But there is a big injury issue at Charlton. And like I said, how can you turn that into a positive? Well, people that are injured will always, hopefully, come back. And I think that, again, is something that Jaden Stockley made his appearance. I think he played, I think it was 45 minutes or 30 minutes. He came on as a substitute against Sheffield Wednesday. Didn't really have an impact. They were 2-0 down at the time, so it's quite difficult to make a significant impact. But a player like Jaden Stockley, a striker, a powerful, strong, brilliant at holding up the ball, but a great finisher as well, and a really good striker at this level. Someone like Jaden Stockley is someone coming back. I think it's been a miss, a really big miss, but he is coming back. And like I said, they have had difficult injury issues across the squad. And again, that has to be something that's taken into consideration. When you have a large amount of injuries, like you look at Leeds, for example, Bielsa's just lost his job, but the amount of injuries at Leeds at the moment, that has affected the performances on the pitch. So there will be issues, and the injury issue is a big issue, but you have got players coming back now, so that is a positive, if you like. You've got Jaden Stockley coming back, but that probably is a huge issue as the reason why they're in a bad position, because they've not lost some really key players, and like I said, Jaden Stockley being one of them. It's difficult as well when you're in a position like you are. You want to be making changes, and Johnnie Jackson was trying to make these different changes he can make, but when you've limited with the players out injured, it's so difficult to make those. When you lose a game, you want to make switches to the team, to the starting lineup, to prove points, to try something different. Again, when you're losing games, what are you going to do? Change it. You're going to change and try something different. And when you've got personnel and big personnels out injured, it's difficult to do so. But now they are coming back, or Jaden Stockley, like I said, in particular, is coming back. That really is a big positive for Johnnie Jackson, and that has to be looked at as a positive now. Of course, it has been a negative, but now they're coming back. There is a sort of a light being shone on that, if you like. I focused on a lot of the negatives, but I do want to look at Charlton's positives. I do want to look at what could happen. And again, there's not many positives at the moment, but can we look at the short-term issues? We'll look at long-term in just a second, but let's have a look at those short-terms. And one thing that the article did say is that the dropping fears has to be one of them. They are currently 8 points from the drop zone, but they've got teams around them I definitely do think that are worse than them. And ultimately, you've got to look at it like that. You've got teams below you that are worse than Charlton. So I don't think a relegation battle or a relegation contender really should be Charlton. I mean, on points, yes, but in terms of quality, probably not. At the moment, quality is probably quite close, but generally in terms of on paper, which is quite difficult to look at sometimes, but on paper, there is enough quality in that squad to not be anywhere near the relegation zone. Ultimately, they are, but they need to turn things around and show them those basics, like I said, the grit, the determination, the resilience, the willingness to run for Charlton Football Club. That has to come first. That has to come first. And then the technical, and I guess the fancy side, if you like, of the game can come. But showing those basics is what is going to turn you around, especially short term. Especially short term. You have to be going back to doing those basics. Now, it could have been 6 points in the drop zone if Ipswich hadn't equalised against Morecambe, but you can't look at that now. It is 8 points, and that's a thankful piece of positive for Charlton. I've looked at the recent fixtures, the next fixture. I looked at the recent fixtures in terms of the games they've lost, but I've looked at the next 12 games, the final 12 games of this League One campaign. I think what Charlton have got to do is they've got to become a nuisance. They've got to pick up some important points. I think if they win 3 or 4 out of the last 12 games, they'll be absolutely fine. They've got Sunderland at home. That's going to be tough. I mean, every game's going to be tough, but Sunderland at home, Accrington away, Gillingham at home, Burton at home, AFC Wimbledon away, Doncaster away, Lincoln at home, Rotherham away, Morecambe at home, Cambridge away, Shrewsbury at home, and finally Ipswich away. They've got some massive teams still in there. And again, some other banana skin teams as well that I think will really cause Charlton a problem. With the form they're on, that's the concern. And Sunderland at home on Saturday is going to be absolutely huge. It's almost not make or break, but it's a massive morale booster if you get something from that game. If you win that game, the confidence of that squad is going absolutely not through the roof at this point, but definitely improving substantially. And again, that's a real positive. If it goes wrong, then you've got to go straight and think about Accrington. But that's what you've got to do. But it's a massive chance. They've got to put in there in front of the home fans. Prove yourself, Charlton players. Prove yourself. Show the basics. Show that determination. Show that grit. Show all of those things. And again, if you put those in, there's a high chance you'll earn your luck and you'll earn your result. And sometimes that sounds stupid, but if you do those basics, do those things that, yes, they are things that aren't scoring 30-yard bangers. And they're not tactically the most tactical things at all, but they're the basics of football, and they're the things that are going to get you those results. They're the things that are going to get you out of this situation. You are in a dogfight at the moment. You are getting and needing every single point you could possibly get. They're the things you need to show. You'll earn your luck. You'll earn your 30-yard screamers once you get those things done, but you've got to go back to that. I mean, Johnnie Jackson said himself, I'll find the quotation here, where is it? I did write the quotation down that Johnnie Jackson said himself. He said in the pre-match, the game on Saturday, he spoke about the things, and he spoke about an interview. He said everyone needs to show a bit of grit and toughness, a bit of character to get through it. Well, I'm not being funny, Johnny. I hate to break it to you, son, but ultimately your players aren't doing that, and they didn't do it on Saturday. That was before the game on Saturday. There wasn't grit, there wasn't toughness. It doesn't sound like there was much character either. And again, that's a worry, and that has to come from the players. That has to come from the players. The manager cannot bring on determination. He can't bring on grit. He can't bring on toughness. That has to come from the players inside. That has to come from them own deciding that that's the right thing they've got to do. That's got to come from them. That's not going to come from Jackson. That's going to come from them. That has to. If it doesn't, then you've got to really look at yourselves. You really, really do, from a Charlton player perspective. That's the short term. What have you got to do? You've got to do those things. You've got to do exactly what Johnnie Jackson did. And it's a positive that Johnnie Jackson's highlighted them himself. But he's got to do it. His players, have got to do it, not really him. In terms of Charlton and rebuilding the football club, I think it is a massive rebuild and restructure long term. That starts in the summer, really. It doesn't start now. It starts in the summer. I think they were hoping it was going to start last summer. It hasn't to be. And so far it's proved that it hasn't really worked out. But next season, the summer, that has to be when that rebuild begins. Now, I'm going to talk about a quote that Carl Robinson said, of course, ex-Charlton manager, current Oxford United manager. He gave Johnnie Jackson his first sort of coaching role, if you like, at the football club. And he said it's something that runs through through in his football club. His passion you have to show to play for Charlton is certainly with him. He certainly has the nous and the understanding. He now maybe just needs to be given a bit of time and a bit more of the reins to do what he needs to do. That's very, very key. He needs to be given time. Don't make any rash decisions. Don't make any silly decisions. Make sure you give him the time, give him that responsibility, give him the because, like I said, I mean, Carl Robinson was there when he was captain, and then gave him that coaching opportunity. If there's anyone that loves Charlton more, it's going to be Johnnie Jackson. That's going to give him the biggest competition there. He understands exactly what it means to play for Charlton. He understands exactly what it means to win as Charlton, and he unfortunately knows exactly what it's like to be losing at Charlton. So he has to be given that responsibility, and he has to be given that time. It's not easy, but you've got to give him that time. You've got to give him that opportunity to show that responsibility. Give him an interim job, and then giving him after that, when he hasn't been able to bring in any of his players, other than I think a few in January, but other than that, not really giving him a good opportunity. You can't do much in January, really. January should be used as sort of a reinforcement window, where you bring in players to see you into the rest of the season. Summer is an ultimate rebuild. You look at the situation, it's simply not good enough. You've stayed up because you showed the basics. Now what are we going to do? Now what are we going to do to restructure successfully? It's not easy. It's a daunting task. But you've got to be able to do it. And Johnnie Jackson, I think, deserves to be given that responsibility to be able to do that. Why bring him in? Why give him the full-time job if you're not going to do that? You might as well have kept him as an interim manager until the end of the season and then got rid. Or gone back to an assistant manager for that new manager. If you're going to give him the full-time job, if you're going to give him the job as the manager, you have to give him that time. I don't think they will, but I heard a few people think that maybe Johnnie Jackson could go. That should not happen. He has to stay. He has to be given that time. Don't make any silly decisions based on recent form. It's not good enough, but get him to the end of the season. Allow him that time. Continuity is so important. Patience is so important as well. That comes from fans. I understand it's a horrible place to be. And I'm not there because I'm not a Charlton fan. I'm just sort of looking at the situation. But it's hard. It really is really quite difficult. But you've got to show that patience and continuity. Making rash decisions is not showing continuity. Taking time. You're going to have those short-term pains. Come back to that big that sort of well-known traditional saying. Short-term pain for long-term gain. You've got to go through these difficult patches like this season to learn from those mistakes and then make sure the restructure is so important. you've got to give him the summer. You've got to give him that summer. You've got to give him that pre-season. You've got to give him the start of the season. You've got to allow him to be able to put his own real stamp on the team. He's been able to do that, but with not really his players, with players that he sort of looked at as an assistant manager and coach, and a few players he brought in January, but they're not really his players, if you like. He's got to give him that time, and I think that again comes from making sure you understand it. There has been positives, and there has been shining lights. Keeping hold of George Dobson's going to be massive in the summer. Build your team around one of those players. Bring your team around George Dobson. Absolutely brilliant this season. Having players at the football club that genuinely want to be at the football club sounds stupid, but it seems as though at the moment that isn't something that's the issue. Having players that want to play for Charlton. Having players that are willing to put in those basics, and also have that ability as well, obviously. I mean, I wouldn't pick up Derek from a season ticket holder for 20 years in the East Stand because he wants to play. I'm talking about players that are very, very good, of course, but also understand the responsibility. That's the most important thing. Bringing in players that care. Bringing in players that are willing to run that extra 100 metres, 200 metres for the football club, for the badge. It's those sort of players. Those sort of players that need to be recruited and recruited right. Getting those fans back on side. So important. At the moment, there's a real disconnect that has to be back, and connection has to be fixed, because the fans are what makes this football club. You've got to make sure the fans come back on side. You've got to understand that the fans are what makes Charlton Athletic. This football club wouldn't have the history, wouldn't have the stature, wouldn't have the fan base without the fans. You've got to get the fans back on side. Bad results, bad form, bad running of the football club. That is the reason why they're very disappointed at the moment, and the reason why there is that disconnect. Getting them back on side is so, so important. Can you do it? It's going to take time. The fans are going to have to understand it's going to take time. I think they do. But like I said, you've got to understand that there is going to have to be a big rebuild. Hope this season is that big learning curve. Charlton Athletic fans, let me know in the comments down below. Have I got any points right there? Please do let me know. Of course, that comment section is always open. Leave your thoughts in that comment section. If you like sort of content, you want to see more of it, we did sort of a Sunderland one. This is sort of the Charlton one. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to see more of that. Hit that like button. That shows you also like the content. Subscribe as well, please. We're on that road to 1,000 subscribers. We're on the home straight now. Please hit that subscribe button. It's the red button there. Also, that notification bell as well. You'll never miss an episode when I go live or the recorded episode just like this one. Take care, stay safe. I'll see you all very, very soon. I've been Jack. See you in a bit.